What if everything you thought you knew about the Vikings, those bloodthirsty raiders from the north, was only like half the story?
Right.
What if their destruction, all that chaos, was actually a powerful catalyst for positive change across Europe?
It's a pretty wild thought, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And that's the fascinating question we're diving into today as we unpack Lars Brownworth's incredible book, The Sea Wolves, A History of the Vikings.
Brownworth. Yeah, he's got a great way of telling history.
He really does.
Yeah.
And if you're familiar with him, maybe from his 12 Byzantine Rulers podcast, the New York Times called him one of history's great popularizers, for that you know what to expect. This book, The Sea Wolves, it's part of his European medieval trilogy, along with Lost to the West and the Normans. And he brings history to life. Such a vivid narrative style, great character descriptions.
And this book, it really does challenge our usual picture of the Vikings, doesn't it?
Totally.
While, yeah, they were undeniably violent, the core argument here is that they were also incredibly inventive. Pioneers, even.
Yeah.
They profoundly transformed the political and economic landscape across Europe, kicking off an era that, despite all the brutality, was truly legendary in its impact.
And it all starts, as the book lays out so powerfully, with one really shocking event. The Lindisfarne Massacre. We're talking 793 CE.
Yeah, Lindisfarne. That's the one everyone remembers.
Exactly. So imagine this, you're on the north coast of England, things are relatively stable, for the early Middle Ages.
Kind of a golden age for England at that point, relatively speaking.
Right. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, these ships appear. Dragon and snake prows cutting through the water. They sneak up on the famous Lindisfarne Priory.
Unbelievable.
The invaders jump ashore, smash down the monastery gates. They behead every monk they find, tear down tapestries, raise the altars. The book paints this picture of the island, just littered with bodies, rivers of blood.
Ugh, yeah. It's grim.
It's incredibly grim. And it wasn't just brutal. It was a massive shock to the system for Europe at the time. It proved nobody was safe. The book puts it so starkly. If the heart of English Christianity could fall, then surely no one was safe.
Wow.
That one event really kicked off, 3 centuries known as the Viking Age.
That sense of vulnerability, it really set the stage, didn't it? It brought in this element of fear that, kind of ironically, ended up forcing huge changes across the continent. Defenses, organization, everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when we talk about these Vikings, what does that term actually mean? Who were these people, really, and why did they suddenly start these devastating raids?
Good question, and the book dives right into that. It clarifies the term Viking itself. Apparently, it comes from the Old Norse Vik, which originally meant like a river bend or a bay, specifically a district near the Oslo Fjord.
Ah, okay. So it was geographic at first.
Yeah, and then it kind of evolved to describe these marauders from all over the Scandinavian peninsula. And you can see why they were maybe so driven. The book describes Scandinavia as this wild, cold region, lots of snow year-round, not much good farmland.
Right. Resources were scarce.
Exactly. And the book argues these harsh conditions shaped their personalities that upheld power and looked down on cowardice. They were forged in a pretty tough environment.
Makes sense. And that ingenuity, born out of necessity, is what's so striking. And the key piece of tech, the real game changer that unlocks the Viking Age, that was their longship.
Oh, the Longship, yes. It's amazing how Brownworth describes it as the key to the Viking Age.
It really was revolutionary.
These weren't just any boats. They had these slender hulls, incredible speed. They were like a prowling wolf pack on the water. That's how they got the name Sea Wolves, right? And the design was so innovative, perfect for the rough open seas, but also for incredibly shallow rivers.
Yeah.
That was the genius.
That shallow draft was crucial.
It wasn't just better tech. It was the ultimate disruptor. It gave them this unmatched advantage pretty much everywhere they went.
Absolutely. They could hit multiple crowns so fast and then just vanish before anyone could even mount a defense.
Yeah.
And their speed wasn't just, impressive, it was strategic. An average of 4 miles per hour, maybe hitting 9 to 11 with a good wind.
Sounds slow now, but back then.
Yeah, exactly. Compare that to moving troops on land. On old Roman roads, you were lucky to make 12, 15 miles a day. The Vikings could sail 150 miles upriver on the Seine in maybe 3 days.
Whoa.
That mobility just completely changed the game. It forced Europe to rethink everything just for survival. And that's really what the book digs into. How did these Viking sea wolves manage to sweep across Europe, establish themselves, and somehow blend in everywhere they went?
Right.
And maybe the most provocative question, Was there actually any, positive side to all that destruction?
It's such a paradox, isn't
Yeah.
it? So what pushed them out? What made them leave those harsh homelands and just explode across Europe?
Well, there's a lot of speculation, naturally. But the book points to the Viking sagas, the stories they told themselves. Tales of warriors seeking glory, becoming kings, earning riches, and then sharing that bounty generously.
The lure of wealth and fame.
Pretty much. That reputation, that promise, it inspired hordes of young men to leave home and head for more fertile lands, the Frankish kingdoms, Ireland, England, even, eventually, all the way to Constantinople.
They were chasing more than just loot then. It was a whole way of life, prestige.
Exactly, a path to status they couldn't get at home.
And down south, the Franks certainly felt that pressure. The book mentions this story, maybe legendary, maybe not, about Charlemagne himself. The late 8th century sees Viking ships off the coast and supposedly weeps, knowing these are fierce foes.
He saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah, he spent years building defenses, but after he died, the Frankish Empire weakened, lost that strong central leadership, and the Vikings just grew bolder, more powerful.
And that leads to figures like Ragnar Lothbrok.
Right. One of the first great sea kings, as the book calls them. In 845, he leads this incredibly audacious attack right up the Seine to Paris, which even then was described as an island of great wealth.
A tempting target.
Extremely.
And that raid on Paris, it was a huge deal. The Vikings basically swarmed the city, raided everywhere, and the Frankish king, Charles the Bald, well, he felt he had no choice. He paid them off.
With what?
An absolutely astronomical sum. 6,000 pounds of gold and silver.
6,000 pounds?
Yeah. I mean, it was a devastating economic hit, but worse than that, it wasn't a deterrent. It just advertised to every other Viking out there that Francia was rich and vulnerable. Paying them off was tragically short-sighted. It just attracted more Vikings.
Wow. So a victory that just fuels more aggression down the line. Okay, so that's the Franks.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, over on the Western Front, where did the Norwegians focus first?
They looked towards Ireland. At that time, Ireland was having something of the Golden Age, quite wealthy, lots of monasteries full of, well, treasure.
Charm target.
Definitely. In 836, this figure emerges. Thorgils the Devil, the book calls him. He starts pillaging monasteries, really takes control, and by 841, he founds Dublin.
He founded Dublin.
Well, the Vikings under him did. It became the first major Viking city in Western Europe, a huge trading port. And from that base, Thorgils basically sacked almost every holy site in Ireland. Within about 10 years, the book says he'd brought the entire Irish nation to the brink of collapse.
An entire nation. Just like that. That's terrifying power.
It was a complete upheaval of their established order, total disruption.
Okay, so with Ireland proving so lucrative, I guess, it wasn't long before they turned their attention across the sea to England, right? Which was maybe even richer, potentially more vulnerable.
Exactly. And the book breaks down that invasion of England really well into 3 main phases.
Okay.
Phase 1 starts around 865. This is the Great Heathen Army. Not just a raid, this was an invasion force. Led by figures like Ivar, whom Churchill apparently called the best of both worlds, cunning and brutal.
A great heathen army. Sounds ominous.
It was. They landed in East Anglia, moved north. Their conquests in Northumbria, Mercia, and East Anglia were swift, systematic. It showed a new level of Viking organization. They found untold wealth, the book says, and quickly realized the English armies were not to be feared.
So they just rolled over them initially.
Pretty much. Soon, only the kingdom of Wessex in the south was left standing against them.
Okay, so that's phase 1. What happens next? Enter King Alfred.
Phase 2. Yes, King Alfred of Wessex. This is where the tide starts to turn, or at least gets held back. Wessex fought back hard. Even after initial defeats, like the Battle of Reading, Alfred, even though his army was often weaker, was incredibly resilient.
Oh, what did he do differently?
He switched tactics. He used guerrilla warfare, constant skirmishes, hit-and-run raids. He realized something crucial. The Vikings might get reinforcements, but they were still massively outnumbered by the general population of Britain.
Turn their numbers against them.
Precisely. His strategy was to wear them down, bleed them slowly. And this strategic genius led to the massive, decisive Battle of Edington in 878.
Edington, that's the big one.
That's the one. Alfred won. It halted the Vikings' ambition to conquer all of England right then and there. And it was hugely significant psychologically, too. It showed Europe that the Vikings could actually be beaten.
A massive turning point.
Yeah.
But you said 3 phases, so it wasn't the end of the story for England?
Not permanently, no. That's phase 3. England did recover under Alfred and his descendants for a while. They pushed the Vikings back, established the Danelaw, but the pressure never fully went away. The Vikings returned in force in 1013. And this time England did fall. A Viking king, Knut, was crowned England's first Viking king.
Wow. So Alfred bought time, resilience, but ultimately the tide came back.
In the end, yes, the pressure was immense.
Okay, so while the Danes and Norwegians are hammering away at the west and south, what about the east? You mentioned the Swedes, the Russes.
Right. The Swedish Vikings, often called the Russes, they looked east, down the river systems of what's now Eastern Europe. In 862, the book mentions Kiev being captured by a Viking named Rurik.
Rurik. Is he considered like the founding father of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine?
That's the one. A foundational figure in that region's history and a Viking. And their ultimate goal, the biggest prize imaginable, was Constantinople.
Miklagard, the great city.
Exactly. The city of gold. Huge, wealthy, and famously defended by these triply fortified walls that were considered pretty much impregnable. The jewel of the known world at the time.
But the Russes still went for it. Against those walls.
Oh, they did. They first saw it around 838, apparently just marveled at the wealth and defenses. But they weren't intimidated for long.
Doesn't sound like them.
No. They built a fleet, maybe 200 ships, sailed into the Black Sea, and attacked. They actually caught the Byzantines completely off guard. The emperor was away fighting Arabs at the time.
So did they breach the walls?
Well, no. Imperial ships eventually arrived and drove the Russes off. Militarily, the attack failed. But here's the interesting part, the paradox. The attack was still a kind of success. It scared the Byzantines enough that they opened up diplomacy. It led to trade contracts that gave the Roses incredible privileges in Constantinople, tax exemptions, rights to trade, even opportunities to serve as mercenaries in the emperor's own guard.
So they lost the battle, but won major concessions.
Pretty much. And they kept doing it. They attacked several more times over the next century or so. Each time, they failed to conquer the city, but each time they renegotiated their treaties and got more privileges. They leveraged their threat into economic and strategic power.
That's actually incredibly pragmatic, almost like a business negotiation using warships.
You could all see it that way, yeah, very pragmatic.
It really underlines how they were more than just fighters, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The book makes that point really strongly. They were legendary explorers, merchants, colonists, and mercenaries. Visionary, courageous, adaptable.
They definitely were. Think about their explorations. From Norway, there's that northern way, basically a natural chain of islands leading west. Starting late 8th century, Viking explorers pushed out, discovered the Shetlands, then the Faroe Islands, north of Scotland.
Driven by that spirit of discovery, not just raiding.
Right, and sometimes pure accident, like Iceland.
Yes, Iceland. Discovered by accident, right? Mid-9th century.
Yeah, the story goes, a Norwegian sailor got blown off course on his way to the Faroes and just stumbled upon it. A land of, vast ice sheets, frozen soil, looked pretty forbidding.
But habitable in places.
Yeah, thanks to the North Atlantic current warming parts of the coast. Others had seen it maybe, but were scared off by the conditions ice-blocked coastlines for much of the year. But then this Norwegian, Ingolfur Arnarsson, he was the one who really committed, went back, and successfully settled there.
Took a special kind of determination, I guess.
It certainly did. And what drew others to follow him to Iceland? The book suggests it was the lure of greater freedom.
Freedom? How so?
They set up this unique, self-governing society, a commonwealth, really, where people could live more or less equally, regardless of their background back in Norway. Quite radical for the 9th century.
A Viking republic, almost.
In a way, yeah. But the book is clear it wasn't easy. The conditions were incredibly harsh. The rule was basically those who didn't work starved. No safety net.
Right. Survival of the fittest, literally.
And it worked for a while. But within about a generation, Iceland actually faced overpopulation. Not enough land to go around.
Already, so what do they do?
Well, that pressure, that constant need for new resources, new land, that just propelled them further west again.
Right. Which leads eventually to
Greenland, another legendary discovery, early 9th century, pushing the boundaries of the known world even further. That relentless spirit.
Amazing. So explorers, colonists. But let's circle back to that idea of positive impact, because their violence is undeniable, right? How can the book argue their destruction led to good things?
Well, it's that catalyst idea again. And maybe the most significant single factor enabling all this, both the destruction and the transformation, was the Longship itself. We touched on it, but it's worth revisiting its impact.
Okay. Yeah, the book calls it one of the greatest technical achievements of the era.
And it really was. Think about the construction, simple but genius, using green logs, still flexible so the hull could bend and twist in the rough Atlantic waves without breaking. Structurally sound because it was flexible.
That's clever engineering.
Very. And that shallow draft we mentioned meant they could land on almost any beach, sail way up rivers, even use canals. Total versatility.
And the speed.
And the speed. That average of 4 miles per hour, maybe up to 9 or 11, we talked about how it outpaced land armies. That meant surprise attacks, yes, but it also meant they could disappear just as quickly. It forced everyone else to completely rethink defense. You couldn't just guard the coasts anymore.
Which brings us back to that catfish effect idea you mentioned earlier, from management theory.
Exactly. The idea that a disruptive competitor, a predator like a catfish in a tank of fish, forces everyone else to become more active, more alert, just to survive. It stimulates vitality.
Okay, I see the analogy.
The book argues the Vikings were Europe's catfish. Take the Franks. Those constant raids forced King Charles the Bald, who the book initially paints as kind of cowardly and incompetent.
Harsh.
Well, it forced even him to eventually fight back seriously. He started building systematic defenses, fortified palaces, reinforced bridges over the Seine and Loire to make river passage harder for the Vikings, built castles in vulnerable spots.
So they had to adapt.
They had to. These defenses didn't stop all the raids, but they did make them harder, riskier. They forced the Vikings to change direction, maybe push more towards England where defenses were initially weaker. Adversity breeding innovation, right?
Right. And England, King Alfred. He's the prime example of that resilience, isn't he?
Absolutely. Even when Wessex was on the ropes, Alfred never stopped thinking, strategizing. He escaped capture, rallied forces, and relentlessly looked for Viking weaknesses.
Which was their numbers relative to the whole population.
Exactly. That insight that they were ultimately outnumbered drove his strategy. Those constant skirmishes, that wearing down process. It was genius. It prevented England from just becoming another Viking colony, like parts of France or Russia arguably did. He turned the tables using their own weakness against them.
And even the Byzantines.
Yeah.
The supposedly indestructible empire.
Even them. They saw the Vikings' military prowess firsthand in those attacks on Constantinople. And what did they do? They hired them.
The Varangian Guard.
Precisely. The emperor created the Varangians, his elite bodyguard, largely made up of Viking warriors. And these axe-bearing barbarians, as the book calls them, actually helped the Byzantine Empire expand its borders later on. The very people who attacked them became their muscle.
That's incredible. Threat becomes asset. It really shows their pragmatism, doesn't it?
It really does. The book highlights this aspect strongly. It even quotes Odin, the chief god in Norse mythology. No better burden can a man carry on the road than a store of common sense.
Ah, common sense from Odin.
Well, maybe pragmatic sense. The Vikings were incredibly good at absorbing local traditions, blending them with their own, and creating these vibrant new hybrid cultures wherever they settled.
Like where? What are some examples?
Well, in the Frankish lands in Normandy, the book says these boorish and irascible Vikings were transformed into gallant knights within a few generations. They adopted French language, Christianity, feudalism.
Became more French than the French eventually.
Pretty much. In Ireland, despite the initial brutality, they ended up building cities like Dublin and contributing to a society that, the book argues, was based on upholding individual rights, maybe influenced by their own traditions.
That's a huge shift from just being raiders. Was it always a smooth transition, this cultural blending? Did the book mention any resistance?
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't always smooth, but their pragmatism usually won out. Look at religion. Many Viking leaders adopted Christianity, sometimes maybe out of genuine faith, but often for very practical reasons to unify their new territories, gain legitimacy, make alliances, defend their lands. They became Christian evangelists in some cases.
Using religion strategically.
And when there were no local traditions to adapt, like in Iceland, they innovated. Faced with environmental problems, overgrazing, soil erosion, the Icelandic Commonwealth, through their own assembly, the Althing, eventually voted to give up some sovereignty and become a subsidiary of Norway, just to survive. A pragmatic political solution.
Wow. That takes a certain kind of mindset.
It does. And they brought these lessons back home too. transformed Scandinavia by introducing coinage based on English and Byzantine models, applying agricultural techniques learned in the south, changing social structures. The peninsula was completely different by the end of the Viking Age.
So, okay, we've covered a lot today, pulling from the sea wolves. For what, 3 centuries, the Vikings definitely plundered, destroyed, toppled kingdoms, caused immense suffering.
No doubt about that.
But through this deep dive, you really see how Europe's Middle Ages weren't just dark. The book paints it as an age of heroes, too, in a brutal way. An illustrious arena of military strategy shaped by these incredibly cunning marauders, but also explorers, merchants, colonists, mercenaries.
A complex picture.
Yeah, unrivaled in brutality, maybe, but also people who profoundly revolutionized European society, politics, economy, even technology.
And it's funny how their legacy pops up in unexpected ways even today, in modern life.
Like what?
Well, think about names. Yachts, exploration vessels, even NASA spacecraft have been named after Vikings or their ships. And the days of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, named after Viking gods. Tyr, Odin, Woden, and Thor.
Huh. I never stopped to think about that. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Right, and even modern tech. You know Bluetooth.
Yeah, of course. Connects my phone to everything.
Named after a Viking king, Harald Bluetooth Gormson. He was famous for uniting the Danish tribes, just like Bluetooth technology unites different communication devices.
No way. Bluetooth is named after a Viking king. That's amazing.
True story. Their influence lingers in surprising places.
So after unpacking all of this, after seeing their role as catalysts, as innovators, explorers, the unexpected architects of new societies, do you still think the Vikings were just, a bunch of brutal savages?
It definitely makes you think twice, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Something to ponder long after you finish the book.